Now, today's guest has been in the commodities, the gold, and the silver space for quite some time. And what we're going to be talking about is, can you imagine the amount of money printing that's actually occurring, the amount of inflation that's finally actually occurring? We've had the Biden administration say they're getting really close to their $1 trillion infrastructure. Then they got a 3.5 trillion infrastructure. The numbers are getting so big they're almost overwhelming. And what does this have to do with you, your money, your investments, and what are the best ways to preserve your wealth during this time? And today we have Brian, who's the CEO of Zacatecas Silver. He's also the founder of it. We've discussed it previously here on this channel. He's also the founder and CEO of Fosterville South, a up-and-coming gold exploration project as well. So we'll be discussing gold, silver as well. So make sure you hit the like button on this video to send it out in the YouTube universe so more people see it. Let us know in the comments right there down below. Can you believe this is actually happening? Yes or no? The amount of money being printed, the amount of flip-flops on inflation. Let us know in the comments right there down below. And it's good to see you, Brian.
Great to see you, Jake.
So what do you think there? I was saying, you've been around for a long time and you've heard these types of calls that eventually governments would get so out of control, they would print so much money, it would become unbelievable, and we would slowly see a destabilization of currency. And it almost seemed far-fetched or conspiracy, people like Doug Casey, they were almost seemed so outsider within the gold and silver niche, but now we've had something like 40% of all US dollars created in the last 18 months. Infrastructure bill looks like a 1 trillion is going to be passed, followed by a 3.5 trillion. That's 4.5 trillion. And that's only the start. So what do you make of all this?
Well, I think, Jake, those types of numbers, the fact that they're tough to fathom, they're tough to contemplate, and they're really tough to internalize or put your arms around, that's not an accident. These numbers have become so big that it's impossible for the average investor. In fact, it's impossible for sophisticated investors to really wrap their head around what does a $1 trillion package look like? What does a follow-on $3.5 trillion package look like? These numbers have become so big that they're tough for the public to even debate amongst one another. And again, I don't think that's by accident. This is designed to confuse. It's designed to create this uncertainty. But most importantly, I think it's designed to create a numbness around these numbers. The money printing that's going on today, the quantitative infinity, the easing, quantitative easing infinity that's happening, this would have all sounded like a complete conspiracy theory 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but now it's here. We're in the best ever macro setup for gold and silver, yet gold and silver continue to languish. And I don't think that's by accident, but I don't think that charade, that circus can last forever.
So that's kind of interesting that the numbers are so big, they basically become desensitizing just by it's almost like a normalcy bias is created and we just assume that it'll go on infinitely. But now we're starting to see those holes in the leaky boat, right? I was getting a kick out of Pete Buttigieg. He's in Biden's cabinet. I think he's the Secretary of Transportation, and he was on. It's so funny. It's unbelievable. So he was on, I think, NBC the other day. He said that we need to pass both the 1 trillion and the 3.5 trillion to ease inflation. He said we need to do it to stop inflation. And these holes in the boat seem to be growing. And now we've had so many flip-flops from the Fed. Biden said a couple weeks ago, nonchalantly, like, oh, we knew this was going to happen. Like they were expecting this and now they're going to control it. Where do you think it goes from here? And do you buy Buttigieg's statement that they're gonna stop inflation by printing more of it?
Well, it's so ludicrous, Jake, when I hear comments like that. And at first, my belief was that these were inept politicians making statements like this, having gaffe moments like this. But with the regularity that we have seen these gaffes, these misstatements, the nonchalance when throwing out trillions of dollars of numbers and trying to quantify that on either side and making mistakes that are really easy to unwind and uncover, I start to think, is there something more going on here? And I think that what they're trying to do collectively is numb, desensitize, and daze and confuse the population a little bit. And I think that if you head out to your local diner, your coffee shop, you have a chat with neighbors, you'll find that most people are desensitized to it. And most people don't understand why we are seeing this rapid inflation. And when I look at gold, and I often do, I look at it, of course, as a store of value, a store of wealth, a hedge against uncertainty. But I also look at it as a currency. And it really is the only currency on the planet that's not being printed with reckless abandon right now. And as such, it's inherently becoming more valuable every day versus its peer group of competitor currencies. And I don't use the word competitor currencies usually, I use the word imposter currencies, because how can these paper currencies withstand the onslaught of printing that's going on around the clock? And my belief is that this ends. All things that are created infinitely, as it seems the paper fiat currencies are being pumped out now, that never ends well. And we're at a point where there are starting to be some cracks in the armor, some leaks in the boat, as you say, and people are starting to figure out this can't go on forever.
How do you think it does end? What is the end game? Do you think really like today when you're looking at it? I'm sure your answer could have been different 18 months ago, but considering what's happening today, what is the end game to this, or how do you think this could end now that you're connecting the dots today?
Well, what every government in history has done that has gone through this type of process is inflate, 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 devalue the currency until the cup of coffee that costs 25 cents then costs $5, and eventually, before we know it, costs $100, $1,000. It once inflation has gotten to that point, once the devaluing of a currency has gotten to that point, there has to be some sort of currency reset. And we've seen it all over the world. This isn't something new. It's not something uncommon to humankind. It's just that for most of us in the Western world, this is the first time we're seeing it. If you go to places like Venezuela, where this has occurred in the past, and you've seen this hyperinflationary environment, you realize that things that cost $10 can quickly cost $1,000, can quickly cost $1 million. It starts to not really matter what these items cost. The fact is the game's over by that point, and you need some sort of total devaluation of the paper currency and a reset. And what does that mean? Well, it's very scary for society. It can lead to instability geopolitically in society, increase in crime, decrease in standard of living. And over thousands of years, the one way that has been proven as a means to protect oneself from that type of environment is gold. It's the only currency, gold and silver are the only currencies that have withstood the test of time, have served as a hedge against uncertainty and a true store of wealth for thousands of years. So I really think everybody needs to look at having some core holdings in the only currency that has been proven for thousands of years. Many paper currencies have come and gone. This is new to us in this day and age in the West, but it's been a common recurring cycle throughout history.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. You would One would think that if you didn't know the price of gold and you didn't know the price of silver, but you got a one pager of everything happening in the world right now, you would look at it, and then if you had a multiple choice, you'd probably guess $5,000 gold, 4,000, 3,000, 10,000, just by looking at the one pager of what's happening. Yet we're not getting that movement, and thus for many mining stocks, it's also held them back as well. What do you think is going on, and what do you think is needed for that to change?
Well, I think that in reality, and this is more anecdotal and more psychological than based in any sort of economic theory, but in any market, when the true believers in a theory, in an investment thesis, start to lie awake at night thinking, what am I missing? Am I missing something here? Should I throw in the towel on this investment thesis? And really questioning their core belief, that's usually right at the turning point. And I think what we've seen in gold and silver, in particular the gold and silver equities, is we've seen that type of thinking. Over the past several months, the traders, the very short term players that came into the market believing that there would be short term momentum, they've exited the space. You then had people forced to exit the space. Right now, I would say for the most part, you have, and this is a generalized statement, but for the most part, in the gold and silver equities, you have true believers in the investment thesis that with this macro environment we're in, we end up with higher precious metals prices. Some of those people are on the fence thinking about throwing in the towel. And when that occurs, it's usually at the exact precise wrong moment to throw in the towel. And we're almost on the cusp of a rebound because of the fact the sellers are gone, the supply is gone. And I think what you said a few minutes ago, Jake, is that we are there from a macro setup. Again, if we go back 10 years, if we had written this one page script of everything going on in the world, including zero to negative interest rate environment, quantitative easing, infinity, the printing presses running around the clock, you would see a setup for gold and silver that's never been better. You would probably guess that gold at that point is $10,000, $15,000 an ounce. It's obviously not there. The exact tipping point, the day that we all realize it's going higher, it's probably too late to get on that train. What that tipping point will be, what the catalyst will be, that's very difficult to tell, but it is like a tinderbox out there right now. A match needs struck. I don't know what that will be, but it's a tinderbox. And when gold starts to move higher, I think this precious metals environment is truly a once in a lifetime opportunity.
So it's funny for me because, running this channel for a while, I've been able to talk to so many of the successful executives and investors, not just in gold and silver, but in a lot of commodities. And they often tell me pretty much the same thing. The gold and silver and commodities bull markets are so irrational and illogical. Almost everybody will jump out at them at the wrong time and into them at the wrong time. And so it's interesting to watch them play out. And it's made me thankful for this channel for my own use. Now, speaking of mining stocks, you and I have talked before about silver. You have a company, Zacatecas is silver. But since we spoke last time, you have a gold company, and that's Fosterville South. So tell us a little bit about why gold and what's going on with Fosterville.
Sure, absolutely, Jake. Fosterville South Exploration is a company that trades publicly and is relatively new as a public company, but it was a multi-year process in putting together. A lot of that credit as to how this land package was formed goes to our co-founder and COO, a fellow by the name of Rex Motton. Rex is a geologist. He's worked internationally around the world, but Rex is based in Victoria, Australia. And while Rex had a very successful career working around the world, he always kept an eye on his own backyard. Kirkland Lake Gold had some incredible success with their Fosterville mine. It put Victoria on the map. But long before the modern day gold rush that's occurring now took place, Rex was busy assembling a 4,000 square kilometer land package of exploration tenements, tenement applications that now form the base for Fosterville South, the public company. Included within that 4,000 square kilometers is a 600 square kilometer parcel immediately south and contiguous with the Kirkland Lake Fosterville mine tenements. Early on, we attracted a lot of attention by raising a significant amount of capital. Fosterville South has approximately 25 million in cash today, and bringing on board some great investors, including Eric Sprott, who did so exceptionally well as chairman of Kirkland Lake when the big discovery at their Fosterville mine took place that catapulted them to a multi-billion-dollar market cap. So Fosterville South drilling, we're active. Over the past year, we've been doing a lot of field work, setting up logistically for a large drill program. We've just started to drill at our Reedy Creek project, and over the last couple of days put out just some exceptional numbers, including an 11-meter hit north of 30 grams per ton gold, and within that, a 4-meter hit grading approximately 80 grams per ton gold. So a very high-grade start to our program at Reedy Creek. And with the past year of groundwork done, going forward, this will be a very drill-centric situation. And as mentioned, we've got some great shareholders in that. We announced both Eric Sprott and Ross Beatty as large investors early on. We've got a tight structure with only 67 million shares out, yet 25 million in cash to aggressively explore with.
Awesome. So congratulations on the drill discovery. So before we go into a little bit of what you think the end game is for gold and silver, let's talk a little bit about any updates you have with Zacatecas Silver. You know, we talked about them, but it was quite a while ago. So what's been going on with you guys, and what do you think is going on in the silver market as well?
Sure, absolutely. On the Zacatecas, we have put out just in June some great initial metallurgical work on the known historical deposit. And that historic deposit, just over 19 million ounces, grading just north of 150 grams per ton silver, that forms a nice base for the company. We've just got drill permits in place to start drilling in that known area where the historic deposit existed. We'll be looking to confirm and really significantly expand that known historic deposit. We've also put out a series of news releases about field work we've been doing. We've now identified what we believe is an extension, a northwest extension of the famous Veta Grande vein onto our property. We've traced it for approximately 4 kilometers onto our property. That's a new drill target. We've put out news about field work on the areas of the property known as San Gil, San Manuel, and El Cristo. And the drill should be turning there over the next couple of weeks. And with that drill turning, I expect a whole lot of news flow going forward. It's going to be a very active several months on the Zacatecas projects. The company's well funded. Again, we're very fortunate to have Eric Sprott as one of our large shareholders, as we've announced. So we've got a great shareholder base, great funding, and the drills are about to turn in Zacatecas, Mexico. So feeling really good there, Jake. And at the same time, for many of the same reasons as we're bullish on gold, we're exceptionally bullish on silver. And I think that in addition to the investment thesis for silver, you're also seeing growing demand via electrification. You're not seeing a huge amount of new production come online to keep up with that growing demand. So the dynamic for silver is just outstanding.
Yeah, silver is what's so interesting if you forget entirely about the monetary component of it, and you just look at purely the types of government mandates you're starting to see in the rhetoric of mandatory EVs and things like that. So it starts to get pretty interesting. But I want to take it from a bird's eye view. You know, you talked about Fosterville, you talked about Zacatecas, but if we take a bird's eye view at gold and silver specifically, um, where do you think we are in this market? And where do you think that it can go? And what do you think the catalysts are to bring it higher? Because I used to think maybe it would be fundamental monetary policy. Now I'm starting to believe it's purely psychological. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, I think that we're already there fundamentally for this incredible move up in gold and silver. The conditions are there, the macro environment is there, all of the pieces of the puzzle are there for gold and silver to go much higher. I do think at this point, it is completely psychological. I think that there will be a tipping point here, and these tipping points are always so tough to predict. But we're going to have a tipping point where there are all of a sudden, for whatever background reasons, enough mainstream investors that realize how precarious the situation is from a macro perspective in the economy, how these paper currencies just can't be relied upon going forward. And at that point, we tip to the environment where gold and silver catch up to what's already there fundamentally. Right now, fundamentally, gold and silver deserve to be much, much higher. What psychologically tips enough institutional and retail investors over the edge to become believers in that investment thesis? That's the $1 million question. It could happen tomorrow, Jake. It might be 6 months from now. It might be a year from now. It's very tough to predict. But like I said, in my personal opinion, I think it is a tinderbox when that match is struck. And again, it's difficult to know what that will be. This gold and silver market goes parabolic.
So, what do you make of the global debts, and do you think what place do you think gold has in that? For instance, I'm in America, and I look at we're the greatest debtor nation in the history of the world, and it's quite the accomplishment. But I wonder, how does it end? Does it end in a debt jubilee? Does it end in a bankruptcy? Or other people have suggested perhaps at some point when the end game is there, they could revalue the supposed gold they have in Fort Knox to offset their balance sheet. Do you think gold has a place in some form of this reset you discussed earlier?
Well, absolutely. And I think that if we look at history, uh, whoever has the gold makes the rules. And sadly, what we've seen in the past decades is a flow of that gold ownership from west to east. And as far as what the ultimate end game here will be in terms of this paper currency reset and economic reset out there, again, I don't think we're going to, as Western countries, ultimately get to make that call. The call will be made by the owners of the only currency that has proven itself for thousands of years, gold. And the biggest holders of gold are not in the West anymore. That has, we've seen that shift happening. And sadly, most of the population in the West doesn't realize that has taken place. I look at a country like Canada now with no gold, and that happened quietly over a number of years to no public outcry. And when this reset occurs and these countries in the West realize that their governments, their central bankers long discarded the gold thesis, I think we're in for a lot of pain. It's very difficult to see how this ultimately ends outside of the fact that I believe it's undeniable and inevitable that gold plays the central role in that reset. And that's very concerning for people without exposure to physical gold. For people that do have the foresight to own physical gold and silver, this can be a very lucrative period of time, albeit in the midst of some chaos and some real difficulty out there that none of us want to see.
So you've been around mining stocks for a long time. You're involved with the big success story with K92. We talked about the two companies that you are CEO of now. Talk a little bit about your advice to an investor in commodities specifically. It seems like investing in commodities should come with a disclaimer, or you should get a guaranteed mentor. So give us some advice for investing in gold, for investing in silver, and for investing in mining stocks.
Sure. I think that what you said earlier in this chat, Jake, really rings true. People do tend to be buyers when they shouldn't be. They tend to be sellers when they shouldn't be. And I think that you have to keep your emotion in check here. And as long as your investment thesis is still intact, you've got to stay the course. Right now, and in any environments like this, I believe in owning cashed up companies that have strong treasuries, don't need to go to the market for financing, have excellent underlying properties, and have technical teams, engineers, geologists, with a track record of making it happen. And if you have those ingredients, along with a solid share structure, you're poised for a win here, because we're going to have our day in the sun in terms of gold and silver as a sector. You want to back the right horses. You want to back the right jockeys when that time comes. And for me, I just look for cashed up companies, track record, good share structure, and great projects, and you're in great shape. Now, the other thing I would point out to people is that mining and mining exploration is inherently risky. So you are going to see these really dramatic pullbacks in some of the equities that you own if you're going to enter at a time like this and ride through to that 8th, 9th inning in the cycle. So you also have to have that tolerance for risk. So I think it's really important to understand at the outset what your true tolerance for risk is, because anybody that tells you this isn't a risky space is doing you a disservice. There are all sorts of risks here. And the market for things like gold and silver can stay irrational longer than some people can stay solvent. So you have to really have that gut to be there in terms of withstanding some of the downturns and bad times. But if you're well positioned in good companies, and I think we're fortunate to have some of those companies with great projects, management track record, and cashed up to really execute business plans, you're going to be in great shape here when the market sentiment does turn. And I think it's very close to turning here.
What inning do you think we're in?
Well, I used the line that I don't even think we're in the first inning. I think the anthem.
Oh yeah, that was you that said that. I forgot.
We're in the national anthem. So that's my opinion still here. And in fact, we are right there. Many of the equities have had a pullback from when we last chatted. So I think we're so incredibly early in this, yet the macro environment's never been better. And that's where the opportunity lies. When we put out the Fosterville South news today, a couple of people close to me said, it's too bad you're putting out such great news in such a bad gold tape. And I look at it a different way. I think that that's a great combination because there's fundamental progress that's showing an increase in the inherent value of the speculation of the investment. But at the same time, you're seeing an opportunity to be a purchaser afforded to you only because of this bad gold tape at these levels. So if you're looking for good situations out there, this is just a great time to be really digging deep into some of these names that are true quality.
And where can we find Fosterville and Zacatecas?
So both trade on the TSX Venture, Fosterville South as FSX on the TSX Venture or FSXLF in the United States, Zacatecas as ZAC on the TSX Venture, ZCTSF on the OTC in the United States. And our websites are fostervillesouth.com and zacatecassilver.com.
Now, to wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about where this might be going from. It's not just an economic thing anymore. Like in 2011, it was just purely economic. And now you're starting to get also a move towards more centralization of power. And unlike 2011, you're starting to really see the welfare state really grow for so many governments in many different forms. And so I wonder, what do you think the next steps are? Do you think that there's just going to be many iterations of infrastructure and this will go until inflation gets worse? Do you think there's going to be new lockdowns in the meantime? What type of effect could that have on inflation? When you're just casually sitting down and trying to take in the big picture, how do you think the next 12 months play themselves out?
Well, I think, Jake, it's easy to be very concerned with all sorts of increasing government intervention in our lives. I think that, here in this particular jurisdiction in Canada where I am, there have been huge incentives put in place for people not to work, not to be in the private sector. I think that we're seeing across the board a real desire on the part of central bankers, big governments, to keep people away from the private sector. There are more and more talks about wealth taxes, increase in capital gains taxes, etc., increasing lockdowns, increasing the intervention in our everyday life. And when I look at all of that, I'm fearful. I'm sad, and there's definitely the potential to feel some hopelessness. However, what I have seen is more and more people like you, Jake, out there pounding the table, exposing some truth, and gaps and cracks in the armor are starting to occur. People are starting to, I think in a small way, think more critically. People are starting to question some of these messages coming from the various governments around the world that seem to believe they know better than we know what to do with ourselves, with our money, etc. And so I see real hope that there's a growing wave of discontent with the way that we're headed. There's a growing understanding, although it's still small, about the danger in this constant, huge expansion of the money supply that's being done with reckless abandon. There's a growing understanding of inflation. I mean, you just have to go outside and buy something and you start to understand inflation pretty quickly. So I see a lot of sign of hope that there are people out there exposing what's going on to enough of the public that perhaps we see the pendulum swing the other way and people start to get a bit more invigorated about economic freedom, personal freedom, all of these things that we want as precious metals investors. And that's part of the reason that I believe in holding a large percentage of my net worth in physical gold and gold equities, silver equities. So I think there are signs of hope out there.
What's pretty funny is we have these, I told you before, I got a 1-year-old daughter. And so there's these little healthy popsicles. They're called Dream Pops, and they're made out of coconut cream, and there's coconut sugar and like ground up raspberries. And it's like this little healthy popsicle. And we buy them from her, and she'll just kind of suck on them a little bit and play with them. And so we get them a lot. And one time, I don't know, it must have been last month, we came home from them, and they were like double the price. And I was like, wow, that's kind of weird, because I buy 2-3 boxes of them. And then we opened them up, they were half the size.
Right.
And I wonder, are you seeing those types of jumps in price goods out there in Vancouver? I know it's one of the more expensive places to live. And do you see it subsiding? Or do you think that it'll continue, but maybe we're just in an accelerated phase when you add in conjunction supply distortions from lockdowns?
I think it's interesting because there are no doubt supply issues, and there is an impact from that. An example, I bought a vehicle 6 months ago from a friend's auto dealership. I could sell that vehicle back to them today with 30,000 kilometers on it for more than I originally purchased it for. That has to do with inflationary.
I think you're just a genius investor. I think that's what.
Right. The old drive the car off the lot and it goes down in value didn't apply here. And of course, there's supply issues there as well. But what I'm seeing is the cost of everything is going up. Of course, we have huge escalation in real estate prices here, big escalation in vehicles, big escalation in costs associated with dining out, grocery shopping, etc. But if you drive around, all you see are help wanted signs. I was in a town in British Columbia called Tofino over the past few days, and most of the restaurants there are on limited schedules where they're closed for lunch or closed for dinner. They can't stay open. Local golf courses here, I know some golf courses now that won't rent golf carts out after a certain time simply because they don't have the staff that will stay to put those carts away at the end of the day. It's crazy. I've seen all of this anecdotal stuff happening around here, and every small business owner, and I know a lot of small business owner, has the same story. We cannot afford to pay what people are demanding to stay here because we're competing now with the government in such big ways. There's such disincentive to come to work. So now we have a minimum wage in British Columbia in the range of $16. Restaurants are now paying $20, $25 an hour for entry-level positions, but they're still closing early because they can't find the staff. So I think we're seeing this huge coming wage pressure to the upside, which will be inflationary. I think that the governments around the world have mandates in place to disincentivize work within the private sector, and they've become fierce competitors of small business. Governments have become fierce competitors of mid-sized businesses who are looking for employees, looking for people to contribute to true economic growth and the growth of our economy. So that's very scary. I do see more and more of an uprising against that, and some thought leaders out there provoking discussion on it. And hopefully we get back to a point in time where some sort of common sense prevails in these situations.
It's almost like more bad things have to happen for people to wake up, and for society, especially economically speaking, to eventually be reshaped. So hopefully it's happening for the greater good as we look back upon it. So if you're listening to this video, make sure you hit the like button on it. Right there down below, we got the link to Fosterville South in Zacatecas right there down below in the description where you could check it out. Give us a comment down below. Let us know what you think is coming up next year as this global financial system continues to throw out more and more interesting cards. Let us know in the comments right there down below. Brian, any last words?
No, it's great to be on again, Jake. And I really appreciate, outside of you shining a light on a couple of the situations we're involved in, just shining a light on some of the things that are going on out there. I think that the discussions that you're having with various people in the industry are very thought-provoking, and that's healthy.
I appreciate it. I started this channel. I wasn't anticipating. I've got another channel that's very large, about 700,000 subscribers, but I wasn't anticipating. I made this one more for fun, and I wasn't really anticipating it taking off the way it did. And it made me realize that, it was important to bring people like you on and just kind of have these conversations that are uncensored, that are thought provoking. And I think it is leading somewhere. So like I always say to everyone listening, please make sure you share these episodes, copy and paste a link, put it on your social media, email it, text it to a friend, watch it again with a friend thereafter. We want to thank you for doing that. Hit that bell notification on it. Check out Fosterville South, and Zacatecas Silver right there down below in the description. And we'll see you next time.